Have you ever wondered why certain desires terrify you? Why you feel shame even when you're alone? Why a simple glance, a memory, or a fleeting image can awaken something inside you so primal it feels dangerous? You were taught to silence those parts, to fear them, to hide them, but they didn't die. They're still there, breathing just beneath your skin. And now you're starting to feel their presence, not because you're broken, but because you're ready. Carl Jung once said, "What you do not bring to consciousness returns as fate." But what if your fate is being shaped by the very thing you've buried? What if the part of you you've tried hardest to suppress is the part most desperately trying to save you? There's a version of you that you've kept hidden, one that pulses beneath the surface, not in a vulgar way, but in something far more ancient, raw, and holy. A sexual force that's not about pleasure, not about porn, not about performance. It's the echo of your truth, the part of you that still burns even in the silence. You don't talk about it. Maybe you've prayed it away. Maybe you've mocked it to survive. But it didn't leave. Wait, watches. And it whispers in the moments you're most alone. This isn't just about sex. This is about identity. About what moves you when no one is watching. It's the secret choreography between your instinct and your soul. But somewhere along the way you were told, that part of you is wrong. That to be loved you must be clean, controlled, acceptable. So you adapted. You became someone else. You smiled when you wanted to scream. You numbed out to feel safe. And without realizing it, you began to exile the parts of you that made you feel most alive. Jung called this the shadow, specifically the sexual shadow. It's not evil. It's not dirty. It's not a threat. It's simply what was never allowed to exist. It's what was silenced through shame, punished by silence, judged by culture, erased by religion. And everything you bury rots, not in its essence but in its expression. That desire you pushed away didn't disappear. Mutated. Became guilt, anxiety, apathy, compulsion, numbness. A secret disgust that rises every time someone gets too close. A subtle hatred of yourself that masks as perfectionism or control. You think you've evolved. You think you've grown. But deep down there's still a part of you that trembles. That part that was never given permission to exist. That's your shadow. And it's not here to ruin your life. It's here to give it back to you. But to do that, you'll have to destroy the image you've built of yourself. The good person. The elevated woman. The one who's healed, enlightened, detached. Because none of those masks survive contact with a shadow. And she knows it. She doesn't want performance. She wants presence. Have you ever noticed how many times you've edited yourself to be accepted? How many truths you've swallowed because they were inconvenient? How often you've replaced the real with the safe? You think you've killed desire. But what you really killed was permission. That's why it shows up in strange ways. In dreams that disturb you. In fantasies you can't admit. In cravings that don't make sense. That's not addiction. That's not madness. That's your inner voice trying to scream through the cracks. Because your sexuality is not just about who you want. It's about what you are when the lights go out. It's about your essence. Your animal. Your aliveness. And the more you deny it, the more fragmented you become. You split into roles. The one who feels, the one who judges what is felt, and the one who hides both. You turn into a hologram of functionality. On the outside, calm. On the inside, a volcano of shame and hunger, erupting in moments you can't explain. Jung said, "Sexuality is the expression of vital energy in its most intense form. And that's why it terrifies you. Because when it rises, it doesn't ask for permission. It breaks the walls. But there's liberation in that breaking. Because beneath everything you fear is the part of you that longs to be touched without masks. To be seen without filters. To be held without fear. And until you face it, you will sabotage love. You will reject real connection. You will build walls and call them boundaries. You will chase chemistry and run from intimacy. You will fall into hollow pleasures and call it freedom. But what you truly crave is integration. And that begins now. There's a moment late at night when the world goes quiet. No messages, no noise, no performance. Just you. And something begins to stir. A sensation without a name. A heat that rises without consent. A thought that slips in without logic. It's not lust. It's not love. It's not even lack. It's something deeper. It's the whisper of your shadow. You've never spoken it. Maybe not even to yourself. But it speaks to you. In gestures, in glances, in silence. It speaks through the ache you feel when you're touched too sincerely. Through the pull you feel towards someone you shouldn't want. Through the repulsion you feel right after getting what you thought you desired. Because your shadow isn't just about perversion. It's also made of sweetness that was never allowed to exist. Of caresses no one welcomed. Of fantasies you buried under spiritual jargon. It is the unbearable intersection between what you crave and what you fear. That's why your body reacts before your thoughts. Why love makes you retreat. Why pleasure turns cold the moment it becomes real. Not because there's something wrong with you, but because that part of you, your raw, wild, instinctive self, was never welcomed at the table. So it learned to speak in code. It sabotages, it disappears, it screams in disguise. You've tried to clean yourself of desire. You've called it detachment, maturity, transcendence. But what if it was just anesthesia? What if, in the name of control, you've been killing the only part of you that can bring you back to life? That child who first learned shame. They're still there. Not dirty. Not dangerous. Just unheard. They don't need another rule. They don't need another prayer. They need to be seen. Without judgment. Without mockery. Without guilt dressed as morality. Because your desire is not a mistake. It is the language of your soul. Yes, it's messy. Yes, it breaks things. But maybe what it breaks needed to break. Mass. The walls. Cages. Jung said that what you repress doesn't disappear. Just returns in twisted forms. So you've been chasing numb pleasures. Scrolling. Hooking up. Fantasizing about love you don't believe in. Why? Not because you're shallow, but because you're starving. You've tried to feel something real, and every time you got close you ran. Or froze. Or destroyed it. Because real feeling exposes you. Not the body. The character. And you've spent your whole life becoming that character. The sensible one. The spiritual one. The funny one. The unbothered one. But you're not unbothered. You're exhausted. You're tired of filtering every word, controlling every impulse, hiding your hunger behind a fake smile. And somewhere in the fatigue, your soul is whispering, "Come home." This isn't about giving in to every craving. It's about finally asking what your craving is trying to say. What part of you has been exiled? What truth have you silenced? Because the shadow only becomes monstrous when it's treated like an enemy. When you sit with it, it stops being an impulse. Becomes a message. What if your addiction isn't a flaw, but a compass? What if your longing isn't dysfunction, but direction? What if all this time, your shadow hasn't been trying to destroy your life, but to save it? But for that to happen, you have to stop blaming others for what you've refused to feel. You have to stop projecting. 'Cause you do it all the time. You think you're in love. But you're not. You're in love with what that person awakens in your shadow. That boldness. That freedom. That rawness you never let yourself own. You're not seeing them. You're seeing your own exile. And the moment they reflect too much, you pull away. You ghost them. You shame them. Not because of what they are, but because of what they reflect. Or worse, you judge them. The one who's too sensual, too free, too much. But if you looked deeper, you'd realize they're living the part of you you've kept caged. They are not the enemy. They're the messenger. And no one, not your partner, not your lover, not your teacher, is meant to carry the weight of your repression. You want to be set free. But you're afraid to be seen. And being seen in the truth of your desire, that's terrifying. Not because it's wrong, but because it's real. Because when someone touches that part, you're no longer protected. You're naked. Not physically, spiritually. And you're so used to wearing armor that vulnerability feels like death. So instead you play it safe. You hide. You fragment. You live half awake. And then you wonder why you feel dead inside. The truth is, balance isn't suppression. It's integration. It's when desire and consciousness stop fighting and start dancing. When you no longer need to hide behind characters or chase meaning in someone else's arms. It's when you look in the mirror and don't just see what the world expects. You see what the world never knew about you. And you love it anyway. Think about it. How many of your sexual decisions weren't about desire, but about survival? How many times did you surrender, not out of freedom but out of fear? Fear of feeling nothing. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of being unloved. Shame creates a paradox. You want but you hate yourself for wanting. You touch but you feel absent when you do. You look but you sabotage when you find. Slowly you get used to the middle, half alive, half dead. That's not peace. That's fragmentation. And it didn't begin in adulthood. It started when you were a child. A child who was told that their body was dangerous. That their impulses were shameful. That surrender was weakness. That child is still in you. And they don't need spiritual advice or moralistic discipline. They need to be listened to. Not from the head but from the heart. Because desire is not against your soul. It is the language of your soul. You just forgot how to speak it. You tried to translate it into logic, into control, into spirituality sanitized of instinct. But your shadow doesn't speak that language. It speaks in tremors, in silence, in longing. And it doesn't want obedience. It wants recognition. It wants to tell you a story. About the time you silenced yourself because someone looked at you with disgust. About the moment your innocence was met with ridicule or coldness. About the hunger you were taught to suppress just to be loved. Jung said repression doesn't lead to virtue. It leads to distortion. So instead of expression you learn suppression. And now your shadow shows up in twisted ways. In compulsions, in numbness, in sabotage. You build double lives. On the surface you seem stable, grounded, mature. But between the lines there's chaos. Repression disguised as perfection. Cynicism dressed as intelligence. Coldness mistaken for boundaries. You hide behind sarcasm. You laugh at what scares you. You reject people who trigger your truth, and call it discernment. But inside you're collapsing. You crave intensity but fear the abyss. You want to connect, but the idea of being truly seen feels like exposure. You want to be desired, but can't handle surrender. So you oscillate between wanting too much and feeling nothing at all. You become desirable but inaccessible. Present but absent. You seduce but avoid being touched. And then you wonder why you feel empty after every encounter. Why no pleasure lasts. Why no one feels real. It's not them. It's not that love is a lie. It's that you haven't allowed yourself to be whole. And wholeness doesn't come from getting it right. Comes from ending the war inside you. From allowing your shadow to sit at the table, not as a threat but as a guest of honor. Because the truth is, your shadow doesn't want to destroy your life. It wants to give it back. But to receive it, you must answer a question you've been avoiding your whole life. What part of you did you have to kill to be loved? When you answer that, something inside you breaks. And in that rupture, healing begins. And you'll remember the people who entered your life like a fire. The ones you didn't understand. The ones who awakened everything you tried to bury. You thought it was love. You thought it was chemistry. But really it was a mirror. A reflection of the part of you you couldn't accept. You didn't love them. You loved the version of you they brought to life. But mirrors can't hold you. And when they show too much, you run. You sabotage. You destroy. 'Cause no one can be your healing. That's your responsibility. Jung said the unconscious speaks in symbols. And there is no deeper symbol than desire. What attracts you without logic. What excites you and frightens you at the same time. What you judge in others but secretly crave in yourself. You keep looking for it in others, but that's unfair. No one was born to carry the weight of your denial. You want liberation, but you're afraid to be seen naked. Emotionally, spiritually. Not because you don't deserve love. But because love, real love, will see what you've hidden. And you don't know what will happen when that mask falls. But here's the secret. Your shadow isn't here to expose you. It's here to reunite you with yourself. So stop pretending balance is about moderation. Balance is when your desire no longer needs to scream. When it sits next to your awareness and they don't fight. They collaborate. They create. It's when you stop projecting your hunger onto others and start feeding yourself from within. It's when you look in the mirror and see not just the version the world applauds, but the one the world was never ready for. And you love her anyway. You've spent your whole life trying to be someone acceptable, someone spiritual, someone who doesn't offend, doesn't disturb, doesn't feel too much. And in that effort, you've left entire parts of yourself behind. But they're still there, watching, waiting, whispering. Carl Jung said, "It is not by imagining figures of light that we become enlightened, but by making the darkness conscious." That darkness isn't your enemy. It's your doorway. Not to destruction, but to return. Return to your truth. Return to your wholeness. Return to the version of you that feels deeply, craves wildly, and lives unapologetically. But to cross that threshold you need courage. Courage to stop pretending. Courage to listen to the voice beneath your masks. Courage to feel what you've avoided for years. Not the desire itself, but the pain of having abandoned yourself just to be accepted. When you stop running, when you finally sit with your shadow, you realize it was never a monster. It was a child, flame, a forgotten prayer. And all it ever wanted was for you to come home. Now you see, it was never about controlling desire. It was always about honoring your humanity. So ask yourself honestly, what if your shadow isn't here to shame you, but to save you? Because only those tired of being divided are capable of becoming whole.